base is dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's October 9th. Jason Longshore, John Nelson here with you this morning. It's a Wall Pass Wednesday, which means we are taking your questions, your comments throughout the show. We have thrown a question out to you this morning as well. Who is your favorite underrated player in MLS or in the world? The guys who don't get enough love, the guys who don't get enough props, the guys who are just consistently overlooked when you're talking about the best. There's so many different ways you can go. There's no wrong answers here. Unless you pick somebody who is absolutely rated, then that's a different conversation. But favorite underrated players, that's the topic here. And it comes up because of some comments about Sergio Busquets. And if you follow Barcelona, if you follow the European game, you know that Sergio Busquets is one of those underrated guys. He's one of those players that in the great Barca teams, who did you think of first? Lionel Messi. Who did you think of next? Xavi. Who did you think of next? Iniesta. Who did you think of after that? Puyol, Piqué, Dani Alves. You're going to get 6 guys at least deep before somebody's going to bring up Busquets. And a lot of the players around him would tell you that they're not going to be as good as they are if they don't have Sergio Busquets. And some of the comments that have come from Busquets have been about, is the game, the way the game is being played, is it passing a player like Busquets by? He's not a fast player. He's not a strong player. He's a soccer player. He is great in possession. He's very intelligent, a lot like Pep Guardiola was as a player. And Pep Guardiola said those things at the end of his career too, when he wasn't a physically gifted player, but when players like that get older, maybe the jump from aging is a little bit bigger for that player because they don't have a lot of the physical gifts to begin with. So when they start to dissipate, it's a big difference, and it feels like they disappear very quickly. But a guy like Busquets is the classic underrated player. I agree with a lot of the folks who follow the Spanish game in a more deep way than I do. Barca does not have the success that they do without Sergio Busquets. He's the one who made everything else work and made everyone else around him better. He made Xavi. He made Iniesta. That trio in the midfield is one of the best ever. Who are some of your favorite players like that just don't get enough credit for what they bring to the team because maybe they don't score all the goals or they're not the goalkeeper making all the spectacular saves, but they're just a very smart, savvy goalkeeper who does everything right and doesn't have to make the big, spectacular saves? I want to hear from you guys on Twitter at Soccer Down here. John, who are some of your favorite underrated players?
Obviously, recency would lend itself to a couple of folks from Atlanta United like Darlington Nagbe, Brad Gazan, but there were 2 that stuck out to me, or actually 3, I take it back, from my Premier League viewing. Callum Wilson from Bournemouth.
Why is Callum Wilson one of your favorites?
Because I viewed Bournemouth through the prism of the little engine that could, and what they've been able to do as a club in getting up from the championship. And frankly, Eddie Howe would be a manager that would be in that discussion too. But what Eddie Howe has been able to do in finding talent and being able to maintain their place in the middle of the Premier League, and that's where they are. They're a mid-table team. But having an emerging talent like a Callum Wilson, who has finally been getting national reps, but for me, just seeing someone who has really just been a lunch pail guy, and he's worked his way up and he's continued to apply himself. And now you see what he's able to do with a Bournemouth in the middle of the table and get stuff done on national team duty.
Okay. You said you had a couple other Premier League guys.
Gylfi Sigurdsson from Everton. as a playmaker.
Would
And
you
for
say
me,
he's
that's
underrated though. He gets
because
talked
he's
about
buried
a
it
lot.
at Everton. I think honestly, it depends on how well Everton is in the table more than anything else.
Yeah, I don't know if that's him being underrated or just his club not being in the conversation. I think he gets talked about a good bit. And that's the differences of underrated and what it can mean. I mean, if you're a great player on a lesser team, you're going to be underrated nationally. If you're a great player within a great team, but not the high-profile guy, you're going to get underrated. There's different ways to define it.
And then the other guy that was, as you were describing Busquets for Barca, David Silva for me with Manchester City over the last handful of years more
That's
than
a great
not.
One, yeah.
Because of what he was at the beginning of their run under Mancini and winning championships, but now he's become that key player that no one really talks about. He's one of those, if you want to run quotes, and yes, I did just use air quotes here on a conversation on radio. He's a glue guy. And he kind of just flies underneath Sterling, De Bruyne, Aguero. It's just, you name all those guys, the marquee guys, the shiny objects that you see at Manchester City. And then there's David Silva, who just kind of just does his thing. And then, oh, yeah, David Silva. But, yeah, for me, those were the three that stuck in my head.
Yeah, David Silva's a great one because he gets lost in the shuffle of a great team. It's a conversation that can go a lot of different directions, and that's why I threw it out open-ended, because I think with Atlanta, we see players who are underrated nationally. And sometimes, and this happens, I think, with everybody, sometimes you get underrated so much and then talked about as being underrated so much that you become rated, and you kind of cross over. Darlington Nagbe is kind of in that weird in-between, isn't he? Because, he gets so much credit from, I think, people who are really paying attention to his contributions, but he doesn't get that credit in national team appearances, or maybe the more important thing is national team stature when he is called in, or when he was called in. He wasn't really looked at as a guy who had to be on the field. And his talent would lead you to believe that he should be on the field at just about every time because he's that good. Brad Kazan's another one, and he's a classic one of a goalkeeper who I think can make the spectacular save, and we've seen him make the spectacular save, but generally he's in a good position to where he's not having to make spectacular saves. And I think he's a very well-rounded goalkeeper that gives you a lot of things that others don't. And I've been banging this drum, I think, since he got here, that he should have been next in line by default after Tim Howard, and I don't think he's done anything to lose that. And it feels like maybe he's getting passed by, although we'll see what happens with the CONCACAF Nations League matches. There were reports yesterday that Zach Steffen was training off to the side. I'm not sure what injury concern there could be, so that might open up a door for Brad Kazan to get the start against Cuba on Friday or against Canada in a huge game next Tuesday. That Canada match, you want to get into underrated matches? I think that one could be a blast. I really think Canada will be loaded for bear in that game and looking to really put the pressure on the United States in it. I'm really looking forward to Tuesday night in Toronto. That could be a great test of where the program is, where Greg Berhalter is in charge of it, and how this team looks in a game that's, one of these games that people have laughed about CONCACAF Nations League and say that it doesn't mean anything, and why are you doing it? You should play friendlies instead against big teams. This is why you do it, because you get a competitive game on the road against a team that can test you and against a team that should be able to test you. It's an underrated match, so I'm looking forward to that. What do we have on the Twitters from people's favorite underrated players, either domestically or worldwide?
Well, the Nagbe and Gazan discussion has been a part of it on a couple of fronts. Nathan Pugh Bias alert, so I guess there should be a siren involved. James Milner.
Yeah. Oh, Milner's actually a great contribution to this because he's a guy who makes the team better. I mean, it's just hard to say that he doesn't, but does he ever really truly get talked about?
No.
And he's versatile. He can play a bunch of different spots too. Milner, is a great addition to this. He's the exact type of player that I think you're talking about as the underrated player in a great team, because it's really easy in a great team to look at the goal scorers, to look at, in Atlanta United, for example, Miles Robinson has had so many big plays that you can't ignore. But Nagbe is such an important part of making this team go. Milner such an important part of Liverpool. Busquets was an important part of Barcelona for so long, and now he's at that point to where he's being phased out. He's getting to that point where it's, all right, we can't count on you 90 minutes every match, and now he has to fight for a spot. And that's maybe where some of the appreciation actually starts to happen for the player, which is kind of sad. You'd rather see them appreciated while they're still on top, but Busquets is starting to get some of that. Oh yeah, he was really good. He was really important. Milner is critical. I think Milner is one of those players that if you lose him, you might not realize why there's a dip in form, but there would be.
Yep. And then Nathan's non-biased guy I hate alert, Ashley Young.
Yeah. That's a good shout. I mean, he's about the only senior player left at Manchester United right now. So he's very important to that group because they're playing a bunch of young guys. And Young has been one of those guys who has been very good. Very good. I think at one point there was thought that he would be a English national team mainstay, and I don't think he's quite there. Doesn't mean he's not very good, and it's the conversation we have here about MLS and the U.S. men's national team a lot. There are plenty of players who are great professionals and great American professionals who, for whatever reason, either don't really break into the national team or don't get much of an opportunity. Michael Parkhurst is a prime example. Chad Marshall is a prime example. I could never figure out in the late 2000s and even into his Seattle run why he wasn't getting an opportunity at center back. Chad Marshall, only player in MLS to win Defender of the Year 3 times and just barely factored in for the national team. Doesn't mean he wasn't a great professional. Nick Rimando. Nick Rimando came up at a time when Tim Howard was one of the best American goalkeepers we've ever seen. Nick's also a different type of goalkeeper than a lot of teams and a lot of coaches prefer. He's not 6'4", and doesn't mean he's not one of the best goalkeepers, if not the best to ever play in Major League Soccer. Never won Goalkeeper of the Year. Classic underrated player. Never won Goalkeeper of the Year. And honestly, if you told me that when his time is done and he retires at the end of the postseason, that they rename the Goalkeeper of the Year award as the Nick Rimando Goalkeeper of the Year award, I'd be good with it. Because 20 years in the league, MLS Cups, Supporter Shields, Open Cups, all of it. Just an absolute stalwart in this league and never gotten the credit that he deserved. Ashley Young and Milner, too, I think are guys that not huge national team guys. I mean, they had appearances, but not core national team players. And that's why I think sometimes they do get underrated. I think it happens here even more because of the perceptions about, well, MLS isn't that good, except for this guy. Well, no, MLS is good, and it's because of guys like Nick Rimando and Chad Marshall and Michael Parkhurst and Jeff Larentowicz and players who get a cup of coffee with the national team but are just long-time, very impactful professionals.
At Mr. Fantastic 08, Darlington Nagbe's way underrated, but I believe part of that is due to his non-overly aggressive behavior. He doesn't go for creating his own goals more than what some would like for him to do.
Yeah, that's a good point because I think that's part of it. there's a lot of folks during his time in Portland that were disappointed because he didn't create a bunch of goals for himself or notch a bunch of assists or have all these spectacular highlight reel plays, because he'd have a few, and he had a few when he first got there. It's not his game. It's just not his game. I mean, it's not exact. The comparison's not 100% accurate, but it makes me think of Paul Scholes in a lot of ways. Now, Nagby's a much better tackler than Paul Scholes. When Paul Scholes would try to get stuck into a tackle, the ref would already go ahead and start pulling the card out because he knew it was going to happen. But as a player who wasn't what people maybe wanted him to be and thought he was going to be, they're pretty similar. You know, Scholes ended up becoming a great central midfielder, and Xavi, said we would have loved to have had Paul Scholes at Barcelona. He could have played for us for 20 years. He was that kind of player, but when he broke through, he was breaking through at Manchester United as kind of a second forward, scoring a good number of goals. He really blossomed when he dropped a little bit deeper, I think, and became one of those eights. And I think that's what Darlington Nagbe is. He's just one of the best box-to-box midfielders in possession that the United States has ever had, period.
Euphonious Bug Nuts, along those same lines, says that it's Nagbe. Makes you wonder how he'd do in the Premier League. For me, his game against Club America in the Campeones Cup showed that he can compete very well at the international level, but hard to say if it would translate to the EPL.
Yeah, his matches against Monterrey as well. I think he'd have a much better chance to compete in the current EPL than the Premier League of 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I think there's much more of an emphasis and respect for players like a Darlington Nagbe. I think he has the talent to. I think he has the technical ability to. It would just have to be in the right team. I mean, we're seeing that with Miguel Almiron. Just playing in the league doesn't mean you're going to be in the right spot to get the best out of you. If Nagbe went to the right team and fit in to a team that wants to play and is going to dominate possession, 100% would fit. I think he has the talent to do that. There's really very little question for me about that. I think he could play in any league he wanted to with his technique. It's just fit. If you put him into a bunker and counter team, he's not going to be as effective. But if you put him into a team that values the ball and values possession and wants to play in a proactive manner, he's a perfect fit. That's why Atlanta went out and got him. And it's also why Portland, I think, was willing to let him go, because Caleb Porter had left. They didn't know at that time. I don't think Giovanni Savarese was in charge yet. I think it was in the midst of that. But Nagbe wouldn't fit into the current Portland Timbers the way he did before. But Atlanta, going into 2018, wanted to control more possession, wanted to play in control of matches more, and Darlington Nagbe was the perfect fit. And I think that's honestly been accentuated this year, where Nagbe has been as good as I have ever seen him in his career, because this team wants to use the ball even more, and he becomes even more critical in being that link. And if he wasn't here, Atlanta United would not be where they are in terms of placement in the table and with trophies in the bag in 2019. They would not be as effective in this style of play if he didn't have a Darlington Nagbe to be involved in it. And I know that brings up the questions about next year, and we'll get there as we get into silly season, because it's already starting to ramp up around the league with teams who are out of the playoffs, and even teams that are in the playoffs. There's rumors popping up. So we're getting into that time of year. It's going to happen. I know there's questions. There's just really no answers yet on how that's going to go. I do think you bring in a player like Emerson Hyndman as cover. And I think Emerson Hyndman can be another player along those lines, a player who is very valuable in possession. Hyndman might be a little more naturally inclined to go to goal than Nagbe is. I think Nagbe's comfortable playing deeper. Hyndman is comfortable pushing forward a little bit more. If he can find a little more of that balance, I think he'll be a very good bit of cover in case you don't bring everyone back next year. And just in a salary cap league, that's always a possibility, and you never know what's going to happen year to year because you run out of room in the cap. You have to make changes. There's also been all the conversation out in the ether too. So we'll see what happens, but Darlington Nagbe is absolutely a perfect call for favorite underrated player. Let's take a break, come back, more of your questions. You guys had other questions as well, and we'll get more of the favorite underrated players as we go this morning. Hang out. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here. October 9th edition of the show. We're in the midst of the international break. There's one match today, Argentina and Germany in Dortmund, 2:45. I'm not sure the TV plans for that. I will check that and get back to you on it. Outside of that, there's really not much going on right now except for with the WAGs in England, which if you haven't seen this whole thing popping up all morning.
Wagatha Christie.
Yes. Oh, well, you can just keep going and going and going. Wayne Rooney is in the midst of it. Jamie Vardy's in the midst of it. Their wives are in the midst of it. Go have fun on Twitter. Go do some searches. Go entertain yourselves. There's definitely some good ones. Even Opta's chiming in. Roma's chiming in. Everybody's chiming in. It's good times. Good times in the tabloid world of the Premier League and now English Championship when Rooney gets the derby. Let's get into more silly season stuff, though, because there's some rumors already starting to pop up about what could happen going into next season in Major League Soccer. Chicago Fire made their big presentation yesterday. I mean, it wasn't exactly a secret that they were going back to Soldier Field. Bastian Schweinsteiger announced that he was retiring. Lots of talk about the Fire at the moment, which means the Andres Guardado rumors to Chicago are popping back up again. It's possible. I mean, it's definitely possible. He'd be a good signing. He'd be a player who would replace Bastian Schweinsteiger as that veteran. He'd be a player that would help sell tickets to Soldier Field. Probably would have been better 3-4 years ago, but
yes,
it's okay. I think he can still be effective, and I think he can help make you a big deal in a market that you need to be a big deal to survive in. We'll see if there's any legs to it. Dan Riccio in Vancouver had an interesting tweet yesterday. Vancouver Radio reported that the Whitecaps had reached out to Olivier Giroud. But Giroud said he'll only consider a move to Los Angeles, Miami, Washington, New York, or Chicago. One, that's a lot of different places he'd consider a move to. That's a few
Yeah,
more
that are
than I
not
thought.
named Vancouver.
I mean, yeah, they're not Vancouver, but we're talking about 7 different teams potentially. I think you can cross Red Bulls out of it, so we'll say 6 because I don't think they would be interested in an Olivier Giroud. But is that the kind of player that the LA Galaxy, if Zlatan goes full Zlatan and thinks he can go have one more run in a major European league, would Giroud be a guy that they would consider? Would Miami consider building around him? Would DC consider him as a replacement for Wayne Rooney? Would he be a big enough name in Chicago?
Galaxy, it would make sense just because that would be Galaxy. And when it comes to Miami, how do they want to be stylistically? DC, yeah. I mean, you're swapping out one Premier Leaguer for another when it comes to Rooney heading home. NYCFC is that, once again, for me, it's style. That's how I'm looking at it. But it would seem like the most Galaxy of Galaxy moves for him to go there first. That would be my number one.
I don't think so. He's not the number one for the Galaxy for me because I think that Guillermo Barros Escaloto wants to go in a different direction. And going to get Christian Pavón, I think, makes you think, okay, maybe Scalotto's got a little more sway here than you would have thought, because I still will hold to the fact that, yes, Zlatan is a beast and can win games by himself. We all know this. But I think the LA Galaxy ultimately will be a better team when he's not there because they'll be able to actually play. I think they become very Zlatan dependent in matches. And also if they go get a couple defenders that can defend, that would help as well.
Yeah.
Giroud doesn't do that, and I don't think he really, I don't know if he fits into where Scalotto wants to go. I think Giroud could be a better fit for DC because of Rooney leaving and them basically going to be starting fresh with Acosta leaving as well. Could be a good fit there. Miami's always a possibility because they're starting fresh. NYC, I don't think needs him. I don't think they'd really consider it. Chicago, Nikolic is likely gone. Yeah, he could be a fit in Chicago as well. I think Chicago or DC, from a soccer perspective, make the most sense. But NYC is being rumored to have an interest in a player. NYC, if you have followed them this season, you know about Alexandru Mitrița, one of the most talented players, one of the maybe most underrated players in Major League Soccer. Romanian who's getting called back into the national team. Well, there's another Romanian young player, Florinel Coman, who is being linked to NYC. This is all according to Romanian journalist Emanuel Roțu. The price tag for Coman is around $11 million. Transfermarkt has him rated at around 3.5 or 4 million euro. If NYC is going to get him at his age, instead of him going to another European club, they're probably going to have to pay a lot of money. I think the Mitrița transfer was in the $9 to $10 million range, if I remember correctly. He has been described as the Romanian Mbappe. So you're talking about a young, speedy player. Would be really interesting. I don't know, under the current Major League Soccer rules, if NYC could make that work. I don't know if they have the room, the designated player slot to make that happen. But again, you're going to see changes because it happens everywhere, every team. So maybe there would be a spot. Very interesting that NYC appears to have cornered the market on Romania.
But I mean, but that's the thing. I think that in this day's MLS, you have teams who are eyeing certain places for their talent pool. For Atlanta United, it's South America. For NYCFC, they have found something in Eastern Europe. And if that's where you're looking for your talent and you think that's where it fits and you're there and you're first in line for all these guys and you're giving this country's talent pool the opportunity to flourish in your system, more power to you. Find what works for you wherever it is and make the game truly worldwide. I mean, a couple of years ago, would we even be talking about Romanian players coming into MLS?
No, because they wouldn't have known what MLS was.
Right. And so now that you're having this build from all of these different places of the globe and everything coming to MLS, find what works for you. Fantastic. Love it.
Let's be real. NYC is not solely scouting in Romania. It's not that that's the plan. I think it's just that the City Football Group link gives them ins in places that other clubs might not be able to get and might not be able to start. And then when you get one player from a country or a club or from a league, then people know your name and they know that, hey, Mitritsas went and had a great year for NYC. Maybe that's the best spot for the next young Romanian talent to go to. But they're looking all over because they're bringing in South American players too. They're definitely operating as a big global club. And I think Atlanta will do the same. I think LAFC will do the same. I think Miami obviously is going to do the same. I think you want to find spots that work for you, but you also don't want to get limited to spots.
No.
That's the issue that you don't want to hit, because sometimes that well will dry up or your connections will dry up and then you're stuck. You've got to be you got to have a global recruiting strategy. And I think NYC will have that. I think they do, but right now NYC is really big in Romania. They're high on the charts in Romania, and they're going to get options on players that want to go there and play with Mitrita, but also want to follow his path. So very interesting to see some of the rumors that are already popping up about the upcoming silly season. We've got questions and such on the Wall Pass Wednesday timeline. Let's get into it.
Sean Vergara, what are the top 3 things that need to happen in the next CBA for MLS to get to the next level?
To get to the next level, for me, the next level right now is winning CONCACAF Champions League and consistently being on the same plane with the top teams of Mexico, your top teams and Mexico's top teams. So that means being competitive in Leagues Cup, being competitive in CONCACAF Champions League, winning both, winning Campeones Cup on a regular basis, those types of things. That's the next level for me, getting to the same level as our neighbors to the south. To get there, you got to spend more. So the 3 things I would want to see in the CBA. Increased spending in whatever way people are palatable with it. And that could mean the same mechanisms that you have now, just increasing allotments. So more TAM, more GAM, bigger salary cap, period. I do think whatever way you go in that type of stuff, you're still going to have designated players. I don't think that idea is going to go away. And I think you need to increase the amount of designated players. At a minimum of 1, I would really like to see the idea of a 4th designated player and a 5th that must be a young designated player. I'd be okay if you want to go that route. So increasing designated players, increasing cap, TAM, GAM, and figuring out the charter flights. I mean, that is a factor. Let's look at Philadelphia. Philadelphia, with their travel in the last couple weeks, decided not to charter from playing in Jersey to playing in San Jose midweek to playing in Columbus. They opted not to charter. The schedule worked out to go commercial. Now, I'm assuming that one of the ways it worked out was that there wasn't connecting flights. Don't know that for sure. But what happened as that went on? They were gifted some calls in the San Jose game. And then Pro came out and said that the VAR should not have injected himself into the discussion on that penalty that San Jose should have gotten at the end, which didn't ultimately affect anything when it came to Atlanta United. But, yeah, that was maddening. Then they go to Columbus and they lose, and they look dead tired. And they lose on decision day. So, and Kasper Shabilko, foot injury. Foot injury, you think, okay, maybe not hamstring stuff. Alejandro Bedoya, quad. Is the travel, is the way they did it, does that affect it? We don't know. We're not going to know. But they haven't finished strong, and they opted not to charter. You wonder about it. Now, the Philly thing, though, brings up a conundrum here. If you increase the amount of charter flights, which has been everybody's pet project, that's great. Very few teams right now are using their 4 legs of charter flights, period.
I was going to ask, yeah.
So you increase it, and the same teams that are already using all of them are going to use more, and the others are not going to use them. I think what needs to happen, and I don't know if the league would do this, I don't know if they would want to do this, I think the league needs to take charge on the charter flight situation, and they need to create a partnership with whatever charter flight company you want to work with, whatever carrier you want to work with to do this, and flights over a certain length are chartered, period.
Yeah.
That would be the way that I think they should do it. That way you take out I don't want to pay for any charter flights because it's expensive. I mean, let's be real. It's expensive. It's not like, it's a little bit extra money. It's not an upgrade. It's not moving
like
up
7
to Comfort
figures.
Plus. Yeah, it's going from low 5 figures to send a team to San Jose to 7 figures. Or 6 figures. No, 6. It's not 7. That's 6.
Well, I was talking about over time using flights.
Well,
7-figure deal.
Yes, of course. But just in a one-flight situation, because teams don't want to pony up for that, the league can probably create a better partnership and get a better rate. And if that gets passed on to teams, whatever, I don't care. However you want to work it out. But yeah, just like TAM. And let's be clear about why TAM is what it is. TAM was created because the league wanted to make sure that teams invested intelligently. They otherwise could have just added more GAM or upped the cap and said, yeah, okay, here, have at it, have fun. They didn't. They created a very specific player type that they wanted teams to go out and get. And I think it's been a great addition to the league. It's raised the level of play. Now, what we've also seen, and I think the players who have been in the league have a very valid beef on this, you haven't seen enough teams use TAM to reward players who have increased their play, have outplayed their initial contract, to re-sign guys. You're not seeing TAM used in those situations as enough. And I don't think there's anything in the TAM guidelines that prevent that. I think it's just teams not using it effectively. It's an asset. Use it. If you want to re-sign a player and use TAM to do it, do it. That's the smart move. If you want to go get somebody, go get somebody. I think that's going to go away as teams get better at managing their payroll and their roster. And if teams don't, then they're just going to struggle. That's just flat out. I don't. There's been a lot of talk about TAM and getting rid of TAM because of that. I think teams are just not every team's using it effectively. That's on them. If the league needs to then again create another policy to make sure that it's used correctly, or say that there's some special super duper TAM money that can be used to re-sign guys, I have
super
no
TAM.
idea.
Super allocation money. It's SAM.
I don't care. Come up with a million different names. It doesn't matter. It's stupid. But they did it because they wanted to make sure that teams used it in a very specific way. If you need to make sure that teams use charter flights, do the same thing. Just create it and say, okay, we realize that there's a lot of owners who don't want to spend this money. We're going to go out and negotiate on behalf of everybody this deal, and we're going to book this for you. So when you have a flight that's over 2.5 or 3 hours or a certain amount of mileage or whatever you do, or you'd have to do a connecting flight, and that would be whatever, you're going to get booked by our agency, and you're going to fly on this charter, and that's it. If the league took that on, then it would be done in the right way. If you just increase the number of charter flights, the same teams who aren't using them aren't going to use them. So if the league as a whole in the CBA, when you're thinking about big level, high level stuff, that's one thing that the league can do to say, all right, we hear what you're saying, players. We agree with you. We know that just saying, all right, now you get 8 legs, or now you get 10 legs, or whatever. We know that doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't. That doesn't even address the issue. Philadelphia didn't use a charter leg all season long. They could have. They could have used it. They didn't need to coming back from Jersey. They could have used it in 2 different ways. If they had wanted to go back to Philly so the players could have a night at home after the San Jose match, cool. You charter out to San Jose and you charter back. More comfort, better, just easier all the way around. You would have still had 2 charter legs. Mm-hmm. So just increasing the number doesn't solve the problem. The league needs to, just like they did with TAM, when they said, you know what, we don't necessarily trust that this is going to get done right. So you're going to use it this way. So the league needs to say, we're going to book this, we're going to set this up, and you're going to get these charter flights here, like this. Use it. Take it. You don't get to choose. You don't get to cheap out. Those would be the things that I think would take the league to the next level.
Yeah, for me, I agree on the designated players and charter flights. Definitely, those would be the ones that I would be waving my hands violently in the air about. Sean also asked, do you think if PT starts against New England?
I think he could. I mean, I think people are making way too much out of this. I really, truly do. Against New England, you have to worry about their transition, and that's why it's hard in Frank DeBoer's mind to play Barco and Pitti. Now that you've seen what New England's going to do, you're going to have to make a decision as you prepare the Atlanta side of things. Do you think New England is going to come out the same way? Okay, then you know what they're going to do. Do you think they're going to come out and say, we can't defend well enough against this team, so we're going to try to hurt them in a different way. We're going to add another attacker into the mix. We're going to play more of a 4-1-4-1. We're going to play more of a true 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 and really go for it because we think we can attack Atlanta out wide. Okay, then that would affect how you prepare for the match. Or do you think New England's going to come in and say, we're the number 7 seed here, we can't play with this team, we're going to sit back and bunker and hope for extra time, hope for penalties, hope to get something off a set piece or a moment in transition? Then you might say, well, starting Pitti would make a lot of sense if they're going to sit back more. But then it also kind of makes other adjustments depending on how you go. So I think there's 2 questions here. Could he start against New England in the playoffs? Yes, absolutely. Could you go with the same lineup that you did against New England that just won? Yeah, it would make some sense too. But neither means that Pitti's not going to play in the playoffs or be relegated to the bench in the playoffs. Any which way doesn't mean that. I think it will be based off the opponent and what they bring to the table. That's going to be the key. And that's what you're going to be looking at lineup to lineup. It's always a matter of risk-reward. And Pitti's the ultimate risk-reward player. He will risk things in spots that make managers cringe. And when you are rewarded for it, you're rewarded with something that you would never get out of another kind of player, but the risk is high. Barco is a little bit less on the risk part, but still you get a good bit of reward. Maybe not quite as much, but you still get a lot. Is that safer in a playoff match? Yeah. Is it maybe Pitti is better in a playoff match when you need to go chase something? When you want to bring him in fresh at the 60-minute mark to go chase something? Maybe. The other thing you got to factor in, too, is extra time. And you get an extra substitution if it goes to extra time. That's a nice bonus. But you're going to have to think about going 120 minutes and how you manage those situations. Either, it goes to extra time, there's always a different feeling. Are you the team that is hanging on by a thread and you need to go more defensive to do that? Okay. Or you're the team that is just beating on the door and trying to find a way to kick it down. Pitti coming off the bench is an incredibly effective weapon in a situation like that. So there's not a one answer to all of it. It's not as simple as, well, he's benched now. he's been playing really well. I think New England's a difficult matchup, and now you've seen them, so you have a little bit different way of how you would want to attack them as well. Maybe Frank DeBoer feels like their defense is weak, and even if they do get more attack-minded, then their defense is going to get even weaker. And Pitti, playing in a role that doesn't have as much defensive responsibility, could be a really effective part of putting this game away early. I can buy that line as well. So I don't think it's an easy yes, no, and anybody who tries to tell you that, I think is trying to sell you a line. I think Pitti will have an impact on the postseason for Atlanta United. I really do. Let's take a break, come back, finish up hour number 1 on a Wall Pass Wednesday. Mike Conti will join us at 10 o'clock. We'll get some of his thoughts on favorite underrated players and other things MLS can do to get to the next level and define what the next level is. I'm curious about that as well. What is the next level for you? I want to see what Mike has to say about that. And you guys out there listening, let us know what the next level for MLS looks like for you as well. We'll be right back after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, October 9th. Getting ready for Atlanta United 2 tonight at Fifth Third Bank Stadium in Kennesaw. Bethlehem Steel coming to town for the final home match of the season. Come on out to Kennesaw if you want to see some of the next generation in action. The Twos have been playing really well lately, unbeaten in their last 6. Bethlehem will be fielding one of the youngest teams in USL Championship as well. So lots of young talent on display. If you can make it out to the stadium, come join us. If not, John and I will have the call on ESPN Plus starting at 7:30 tonight. What else do we have on the Wall Pass Wednesday timeline?
Chris Ashley at Youth Guide Cash, GVLsoccer.com, YTSS, and a contributor to Greenville Triumph Weekly here on the network. He says he listened to yesterday's show on delay and had an interesting thought regarding the discussion about contracts for Atlanta players for next year and who's the most important to build around. With the volatility around rosters and coaches, how do you think the club ranks coaches' desires, players' desires, fan interest, and club's interest, meaning profit, when making player acquisitions and extending or not extending contracts? Hashtag Wild Pass Wednesday.
Wow, okay. What are the categories again?
Coaches' desires, players' desires, fan interest, profit.
Profit, okay. It's tricky because it's probably different for every club, to be honest. there's some clubs where the manager is very, very involved in transfer situations and what the roster can look like. There's others where the manager's like, tell me who I'm working with, and cool, we're going to go get down to business. There's others where the manager will request a type of player, like I need a 6, or I need a right winger, or I need a right back, or I need a versatile defender, whatever. Profit always plays a role. It should. I think for some clubs, maybe it doesn't play as big of a role as it should. Looking at DC United, who keep consistently mismanaging the stuff and letting players play contracts out and letting them walk. Luciano Acosta, just saying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the player's desire factors into it too, but it's lesser, and I think the fan desire in general is lesser because you can't make your transfer policy based off fan favorites. Does it have an effect? Sure. But is it the number one thing? No, I don't think so. And I don't think the player desire is the number one thing either. I think probably, to be honest, in general, and this is going to vary club to club, and I don't know what the formula is here in Atlanta. I'm not in those conversations. I think profit has to be the number one thing. I think doing good business and doing proper business has to be the number one thing. And then the coach's desire, or the technical staff desire, or the technical director desire, however you want to lump all that together to put the right team on the field to be successful, I think that's right there. Some clubs, and it probably varies a little bit based off where the club is in a cycle, but some clubs have to prioritize profit over everything. Others prioritize the team on the field and the quality of the team on the field. I think in general, Atlanta would be prioritizing the team on the field right now. I think profit would be next. And I think the player's desire and the fan desire are both probably about the same. And after those two, they have to be, because you can't run the club based off social media reactions to signings, and you can't run the club based off what the player wants, because look at Houston right now. What Albert Ellis wants to do is play out his contract and walk for free. That's not good for the Houston Dynamo. That does nothing for the Houston Dynamo, except you get him for another year. But are you going to win MLS Cup next year if you're the Houston Dynamo? I don't think so. I don't think you have the talent to. So wouldn't it be better if you're the Houston Dynamo to say, all right, I know what you want to do, Albert, but we need to do this, and we're going to do this. You have to. If you don't, I think you're going to struggle on the field. So I would go profit, coach or technical staff or technical director as 1-2, and it varies depending on the club, because we know that there are some clubs that have to make a profit. They have to make money on transfers. They have to do it. They don't have a choice. They might have to sell guys they don't want to because of that. Financial fair play factors into that in Europe as well. Some clubs, that becomes the top priority for a while. Others, it's the quality of the team. On the flip side, it's the fan and the player side that are lesser influences.
Couple of thoughts from Eric Schwartz. First, regarding yesterday's Club World Cup conversation, doesn't Al Ain's ascendance to the final last year present a counterpoint to the expansion doubters? I get the reluctance to invite blowouts, but you never know until you play these interfederation matches.
Yeah, I mean, it should. You had a pretty unique situation with River Plate last year and the Libertadores chaos that I think left them pretty deflated by the time they got to the Club World Cup. I just don't know how much they actually had in the tank at that point, so maybe it opened the door. But this isn't the first time that you've seen the South American teams get upset. The European teams have been dominant. Not really a surprise. They should be. But I'm with you. I think having a true World Cup format for this, you're going to get some upsets, especially when you get past the defending Champions League champion. When you're getting the quarterfinalists from the Champions League playing against Boca or River or whoever, Gremio, or a Monterrey or a Tigres or the top club out of Africa, the top club out of Asia, you're going to get some upsets. It's going to happen. So, yeah, it should open the door a little bit more to say, hey, this can actually be kind of cool. This can work.
And then Eric says, we agree that MLS would be well served by releasing more detailed contract and transfer information like the NBA does. Do you think the barrier to more transparency lies more with the league itself or global norms around limiting that information?
I don't know how much global norms limit that information. It's not completely limited. I mean, stuff does get out. Stuff is known for the most part. I think when the English press, for example, is talking about an upcoming transfer window, they're more informed than the American press is. Now, is there probably a happy medium? Sure, I think so. But it's a good point. I mean, from a club perspective, the less information that's out there, the better. But I think from a media and driving interest standpoint, it's better if there's more out there. And that's always the balance that any club wants to walk. You know, I don't think it's something that individual clubs could do in MLS, but if the league made it more available, I don't think it would be a detriment. I think it would actually help, and I think it would drive conversation. And Darren Eales was speaking at a conference today, I believe, one of the leaders in football conferences, and he said one of the big challenges for MLS coming up is to increase the media rights and to make more money on media rights. It's like 10% of what comes in right now. That's a lot lower than it is in England, for example. That's not necessarily bad because it's good to have a bigger chunk than you're getting in England right now come from ticket sales, come from sponsorship sales. But Darren had a good point, saying in a perfect world, you'd get a 30-30-30 type of split between those. And in England, it's not that. And in the U.S., it's not that. But the way you increase those broadcast rights is you have more content and more compelling content that is driving ratings and getting more interest. And it's going to take time. I mean, we've talked about it every other day on the show, it seems like, where you get somebody saying something stupid in the media, dismissing the league or dismissing the sport, somebody on SportsCenter, throwing out nonsense about it, not being informed or saying something dumb. You've got to battle that. But you've also got to meet the media partners, I think, halfway with conversation. And the NBA's done a great job of it. I think MLS can learn a few things and find a happy medium to where everybody's okay with those steps. That'll do it for hour one. Mike Conti's going to join us on the other side. I want to get Mike's thoughts on that balance as Mike's work with the Atlanta Hawks and knowing the NBA really, really well. I think he can provide a really unique perspective on what MLS can learn from the NBA when it comes to broadcast and when it comes to this conversation. We'll see what Mike has to say right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, Soccer Down Here, October 9th edition. It's a Wall Pass Wednesday. You guys have submitted lots of good questions, and we'll get to those. One of them has kind of led us to the conversation we're going to start with our friend Mike Conti. What's up, Mike?
What's up, guys? How are you?
Good. We're playing off of a couple different questions about MLS getting to the next level and what that means and what they have to do to get there, whether it's the CBA conversation or other stuff. Darren Eales was speaking at a conference and talked about media rights, and this is at the Leaders Business is the account on Twitter, Leaders Biz, and it's a conference and content platform for leaders in global sports business. And Darren Eales said the big challenge for MLS is growing the media broadcast rights, and he said that it's about 10% of the revenues coming in right now, which is very different than the Premier League, for example, where it's a huge chunk. And maybe they have something to learn from what Atlanta United and other MLS teams have done in terms of making money on tickets and making money on sponsorships. But how do you think MLS can go about growing those media broadcast rights?
Get better players, and as a result, have better teams and better games. I think that's a huge part of it. Now, MLS is obviously going in the right direction. For the first time ever now, they're making some money off of their national TV contracts. And I know some teams make money off local broadcast. Most of them do not. Atlanta United, as far as I know, they don't get a rights fee. They certainly don't from the radio station. I don't think they do from Fox, but I think Atlanta United then has the right to go out and sell sponsorships, so they can monetize it that way, but it's not like they're paid a rights fee. It's complicated because you're only going to get television rights money commensurate with your ratings. And right now, MLS is commanding ratings that's about half of what the National Hockey League gets in their national TV ratings. I think the National Hockey League makes probably 10 times as much as MLS on their TV deals in the United States and Canada. It might even be more than that. So maybe that's the objective. I mean, if you're at 50% of the NHL ratings, maybe you set your price at 50% of the NHL rights fees.
Makes sense.
But it might be more complicated than that. The only way you're going to get your ratings to go up, though, is to have better games. And to have better games, you need to have better players. So this is what Atlanta United has done so well, and what other teams kind of need to follow is, you got to find a way to find better players, whether it be from South America or Central America or whatever. And as a result, you're going to have teams that'll play more entertaining soccer and more people will watch. But that's not something that can be done before 2021 when these media rights deals come up. It's going to take longer than that. And that's why, I understand what Darren's talking about in terms of the challenge. But, this is a very important issue for the league because it has a direct effect on player salaries. It has a direct effect on a lot of other things that the players are fighting for in the CBA. In the National Football League, they get billions of dollars a year in TV rights. And I think the way their CBA is worked out is that players get anywhere from 47 to 52% of the revenue. The MLS could probably get into a similar model where players are getting 47 to 52% of the revenue. But, what's the revenue? the revenue is only going to increase if you get more TV rights. So, long story short, you just got to play better games and have better players. And that'll kind of get the circle of life started a little bit, where you're playing better games, they're talked about more, they're viewed more. You get higher ratings, which means the league is in a position of leverage to ask for more in terms of TV rights. TV rights money then goes back to the clubs. The clubs go out and spend money to get even better players, and the cycle kind of continues that way, right? So
it's interesting when you look at the timeline here. They can start negotiating according to the reports that are out there in 2021, but the current deal runs through 2022. Then you look at players who have been rumored when it comes to MLS over these next 3 years. Lionel Messi's name has come up. Cristiano Ronaldo's name has come up. You're getting Olivier Giroud now. You're getting more talk. You're getting a lot of Mexican players like Andres Guardado. You're getting more talk about these things. And over 3 years, when you have Miami come into the league, when you have St. Louis come into the league, when you have other teams come in, I think by the time those negotiations happen, you could be talking about a league with more stars in it.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt, and hopefully that's true. But then the stars and the star power needs to translate to rating. Because
that's the
if
part
you're
that's going to be tougher to translate quick. Yeah, I agree.
If you're a negotiator for Disney or a negotiator for Fox or a negotiator for Comcast, who owns NBC, or if you're a negotiator for Flow, or whoever is going to be involved in this bidding. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Amazon, Yahoo were involved in the bidding in some way. If you're a negotiator, it's great if you have Olivier Giroud playing for Vancouver. I guess he doesn't want to play there, but it's great if you have Olivier Giroud in the league. It's great if you have Lionel Messi in the league. It's great if you have Cristiano Ronaldo in the league, but it doesn't mean anything if you're still getting 560 TV households for, Messi to play against New York Red Bulls. It's got to translate into more, because that's where the checks are going to get cut. Now, the league could go to a more untraditional model, and I think they've done this before, where, the networks pay production costs, and then they split ad revenue with the league. I know that's been done before. That's been done in the National Hockey League as well. But you're not going to get the big money until you get past that model and you have networks paying $50, $60, $100 million a year. That's why I think it's very plausible that the local TV rights are going to be bundled into the next deal, because most teams are not monetizing their local TV deals right now. If you give Fox and ESPN, for example, control of everything, where if you give it to ESPN and they put all the local games on Plus, and then ESPN's getting $6 a month for that, that might actually be a deal that economically works out better for Major League Soccer. So we'll see. I think there's a lot of enticing options. I hope they don't forget about radio in the next deal, as they did with U.S. Open Cup. That makes me very, very nervous. No, I'm serious. That makes me very nervous, because that was ESPN's argument that radio was going to take away from streams, and that's why they wouldn't permit us to do radio. I'm gravely concerned about that. That if the league just gives everything over to ESPN, and they say everything's going to be streamed and that's it, that there's going to be no room for radio in the next year. I think that'd be a massive mistake for the league. But often radio gets forgotten in things like this. So I just hope they tread with caution. And I don't think it is in MLS's best interest to get off linear TV ever.
Agree.
It's okay to stream out of market games. It's okay even to stream some in-market games in the regular season if that's what you have to do to get cleared. But getting off linear TV, I know everyone's cutting cords and streaming, and this is the way of the future. But I think to be considered a mainstream sport, you've got to stay on linear TV, and I hope they're very, very cautious about that.
Mike, you mentioned bringing in better players. We also got into the discussion about the new CBA and You want to bring in better players. You open up possibilities maybe for the fourth DP and what Jason was discussing with a young DP to make it 4+, 4 and or 5. And I think that's got to be part of this issue too. You want to bring in better players, then create those opportunities for the teams that want to do that.
Agreed. And again, your concern is how many of your thrifty owners are going to be on board with that compared to how many frugal owners are going to be on board with that. But that's what's going to push the league forward. And I think the CBA is going to look dramatically different than the one that exists right now. But I don't think they're going to get that done in 100 days or 160 days or however long it is. I'm beginning to wonder more and more if they're going to play the 2020 season under the existing CBA and try to lay the framework for a dramatically different CBA in 2021, because to me, there's just not enough time to make all these radical changes right now.
Yeah, see, that's the question is how radical do the changes get? I think if there's a deal done ahead of the season, it can't be that radical. It can't be dramatically changing how the salary cap or allocation money or those things work. Adding a DP, all right, I could see that. Adding money to a cap or adding allocation money, all right. But if you're going to rewrite the way rosters are built, it's going to take more time. And, yeah, I'm with you. I don't expect a work stoppage. I really don't. I don't think that's going to benefit anyone involved. I don't think the players are really wanting to go down that road. I expect to see them play under the current CBA far more than I expect a work stoppage.
I'd be stunned if there was a work stoppage because the players have too much to lose. And they can posture and say that, we've been squirreling away money for 2 or 3 years and in anticipation of a work stoppage. But you have so many players that are making below 6 figures right now. The rank and file players really, really would suffer tremendously if they didn't play in 2020 or had a severe work stoppage. Not to mention the league would. I mean, that would be devastating for the league, as much forward momentum as it has right now. This is a lot different than when you had a major work stoppage in the NBA a couple years ago, or a major work stoppage in the National Hockey League that canceled half the season in 2011, 2012, or when you ganked the entire NFL preseason, and I think that was 2011. This is way, way different, because there you're talking about established leagues who are, basically putting 8-figure TV contracts in the bank, and they could afford to take the hit for a couple months. MLS is not there yet, so both sides have tremendous incentive to avoid that work stoppage. And that's why I agree with you, Jason. I think that the chances of them playing without a new CBA or under the terms of the existing CBA until they can get the new one done feels very, very realistic to me, and honestly would feel like an act of good faith on both sides.
We were also getting into the discussion, Mike, in hour number 1 about underrateds and the idea of, okay, who is your most underrated player? And a lot of folks from an Atlanta United perspective were mentioning, Darlington Nagbe, Brad Gazan, folks like that. If we open that question up to your floor, not just hanging on to it from an Atlanta United perspective, if you so choose, who are your underrateds in the sport?
Well, I don't think Nagbe and Guzan are underrated. I think they're taken for granted. Does that make sense? I think everyone appreciates what they do and they know how good they are and how valuable they are. It just doesn't get talked about enough. And I think taken for granted and underrated are two different things. Like if we're talking about
nationally is where I would go with it.
Yeah, maybe. That might be true. I don't put a lot of credence into what most people nationally say about anything because I don't think they watch Atlanta United on the micro level the way that we do. But I do agree with you, Jason. And obviously the U.S. men's national team call-ups, I think, would be a pretty good reflection of that. Although, I guess Nagbe may have refused one. I don't know, reportedly. As far as underrated on Atlanta United, boy, oh boy. let me get back to you on that. I think underrated in the league. Carlos Gil is someone we talked a lot about, this past Sunday as being someone who's really, really underrated, not talked about, underappreciated, a really, really good player. An all-around dangerous, threatening player that I think because he plays in New England, he just doesn't get talked about on the same level as Vela and Zlatan and Joseph and some of those big stars. And you can understand that. I mean, when you're playing in New England, when you're playing in Columbus, when you're playing in Houston, Dallas, you're kind of playing in anonymity a little bit. So I get it with Carlos Gil. I think Paxton Pomykal is someone that has a very high ceiling. I don't know if it's fair to say he's underrated because he's gotten some men's national team calls, but he's someone who stood out to me when we saw him in April. That I loved watching him play. I thought he was really, really good. He's young too, so he has time to get that attention. Boy, as far as Atlanta United is concerned, underrated on Atlanta United. Again, it's hard because we're watching on the micro level. So I feel very, very strongly about every player on this team. Is it possible that Pity Martinez might be a little bit underrated?
That's what I thought you were going to mention. Yeah,
he had this, enormous reputation coming into MLS, reigning South American Player of the Year. Seems silly that we'd be talking about the South American Player of the Year being underrated, but man, especially. The last 3 or 4 matches prior to Sunday when they gave him a break, I thought he was Atlanta United's best player by far over the month of September. And that includes Joseph, who had a bunch of goals prior to getting hurt. I thought Pitti was Atlanta United's best player by far in the month of September. No one talked about it, really, other than us. And again, it might be one of those for granted situations. It might be one of those, well, he's expected to do that situations. I'm not sure. But, we're seeing a lot of chatter about newcomer of the year and best 11 and all of that. And I'm not saying that Pitti is going to make best 11 in MLS or should, but I'm a little bit surprised to see his name just completely excluded from everything. Because Pitti had a good year. He had a really good year. If he were not the reigning South American Player of the Year, if he was Pity Martinez, who no one had even heard of, coming from, some obscure far-flung place and entering the league and parachuting into the league, then we'd be saying, wow, this guy's pretty good. But because he had such a big reputation and such a high level of expectation coming into the year, I just feel like we've kind of underrated him a little bit more than we should.
Yeah, I think he turned to the underrated side as the year went on and then just wasn't fairly rated at the end because I'm with you. I thought he was very, very good as the year went on. 5 goals, 9 assists is not a bad season. And when you combine that with the number of chances that he created, he's been impactful. Now, He's a different player. And it leads to another question that everybody will be talking about between now and about noon on October 19th when the lineup comes out. Is he going to start against New England in the playoffs? I don't know if there's an obvious answer here at all.
No, I think, oh boy. I mean, it's so tough because if he's not, people are going to freak out and overreact to that. And some of his doubters and haters are going to, cue that up as validation for whatever, half-baked opinion they have about Pity Martinez. I think so much of it, though, depends on tactics. And I think in a playoff game, a knockout game, you've got to be really super safe. And I was thinking about this morning on the way in. I mean, look, Pitti is not out there to give you cover defensively and do things that will make him a responsible defensive player, though I think he has shown an increased effort defensively over the last couple months. But he's not going to be out there to be a stopper. He's going to be out there to go out and facilitate and try to create a goal, whereas you might be better served having a player in there who can be a little bit more two-way because you don't want to get in the trap of falling behind or conceding an early goal and then let the match play out as it is and bring Pitti on. But what I'm concerned about is it'd be a completely defensible decision for Frank to not start Pitti, but it's going to increase that chatter that I think we've all been annoyed by this year, from both inside Atlanta and externally about, this proves that Pitti was a bust. No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. But I don't know how Frank's going to play it. And I trust him. I mean, look, Frank more often than not has pushed the right buttons with his selections this year. So I trust him. It's not something I'm going to lose sleep over the next couple weeks. I think what we saw on Sunday was you can go out and you can beat New England and play your game and control the match without him. And I think we've seen in other cases that you can go out and you can play your game and control the match with him. So we'll see.
Because you're having to look at things situationally. This is, okay, Team A is coming to play Atlanta United. They play a certain way. Which 11 players are best suited out of the blocks to go up against that particular team to get you the desired result? Right. And sometimes it's going to, the midfield's going to look a little different. Your attack is going to look a little different. And so that's why, we mentioned how this roster was constructed, and it is situationally. And especially when you're looking at the playoffs, it's like, okay, which 11 gives me the best strategic effort to get the result here to move on?
Yeah, and I would love to see that Kansas City lineup where they had Pitti, Barco, and Joseph all in at the same time, and just go out and play free, and you only live once, and have fun, and go chase goals, and if you get burned in transition, no big deal. We're entertaining our fans. But you can't do that now. You're in a knockout game. Even if you were playing legs, you could probably get away with that. You don't have that luxury now. It's different. And here's where I think the types of matches that you had to play against Club America and in U.S. Open Cup are really, really going to help you, because it is a different mentality when it's a 90-minute knockout game. It's a completely different mentality. And it's not about entertaining your fans anymore. It's about achieving your objective, which is winning the game. How do you assure that you're going to win? You don't give up a goal. You are not going to lose if you don't give up a goal. That's how I think Frank's going to approach this. And I think that's, again, totally defensible. And if that means Pitti's got to come off the bench or not play at all, I'm all for it. It's all about the team right now, not the individuals.
It's such a fine line going into this, and these are the complications that you get playing a team for the second time in this format, where you had the regular season game, where both had plenty to play for. I don't think either team, Atlanta or New England, held anything back on decision day. But now the questions are, what changes could you see? What unexpected things could you see? For New England, I don't know how they approach this. I really don't. I think that was their best lineup on decision day. What can they do to be better, or what can they do to throw something different at Atlanta? And then how does Frank DeBoer respond? It's going to be an interesting conversation over the next few days.
Yeah, and I think what you said in the full-time report on Sunday has kind of stuck with me. I think if they make a change, they go to 5 in the back, and they just play ultra safe, especially because they're on the road. And if they have to go to 5 in the back, personnel-wise, I don't know how they achieve that. So that's something we're going to have plenty of time to discuss this over the next, 11 days? I mean, it feels like this is going to take forever to get there. And we're going to have plenty of time to go over all the possibilities.
And then did we talk? Did you guys talk previously about releasing MLS contract numbers at any point?
No, not to my memory.
No, not exactly.
Okay.
I mean, it was in the conversation about MLS kind of increasing the broadcast rights, increasing interest, and the question from Eric Schwartz was about, does MLS feel like they don't want to release this information like the NBA does, at least in as detailed as the NBA can get with it? The MLS keeps it more under wraps because of the global norms of it. What have you seen, as on the NBA side of things, with that type of discussion? And I guess what struck me was the opening of the free agent window and how it was such a huge talking point in sports, not just in basketball circles. You had to know where people were going to go, what trades were going to happen. It was must watch, must pay attention. I wonder what MLS could learn from the NBA in those regards.
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. So are we talking about releasing individual player contract numbers, or I'm not quite sure I see where we're going with this.
To the degree that the NBA, like, you can follow along with how much money they have under the cap, what exceptions they have, how they can construct their roster, which informs the free agency day and how that looks and all the conversation that comes around it.
Well, let me tell you what the big difference is, because teams do not put that information out at all. Now, I mean, if they sign a player to a max deal, you know what the max number is because it's locked in under the CBA, but teams don't put that out. The difference is you have in the NBA, Chris Mannix and Adrian Wojnarowski and Mark Stein and all these reporters who are going out and getting the information from agents. You've got a very aggressive press corps that's going out and finding out the numbers without the assistance of the teams. And quite frankly, it's like that in all the major stick and ball sports in this country. I mean, when the Falcons sign Julio to his extension, they didn't put the numbers out. Adam Schefter had to go out and get it. And it's not a slight or a measure of disrespect on soccer writers and journalists in this country at all. It's just we don't have nearly as many of them as we do covering the NBA and NFL. And maybe they don't have the same types of relationships with agents as, say, an Adam Schefter and Adrian Wojnarowski. That's the difference. I mean, we can have MLS silly season and talk about how far New England is under the cap and how far over LA Galaxy is over the cap going into the season. We need to find journalists who are going to go out and dig that. And that's very, very tough when the teams are not going to provide the information. But the teams don't provide the information in the other major leagues. So I think, for that, Jason, to become a bigger thing, it just comes down to gumshoe work by us, the press corps. And maybe we all need to have a couple more steak dinners with agents, because that's basically how it works in the NBA and NFL.
And those guys get it right, too. I mean, it's very rare that you see these projected salary cap numbers and it's dramatically off.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and in many cases, I don't want to spoil anyone's bedtime fairy tales, but in many cases, teams will intentionally leak the information to an Adam Schefter or an Adrian Wojnarowski because they can leverage those reporters later on if they need help to execute a trade or sign a free agent or something like that.
And that would be Eric's point.
Sorry,
everyone. Interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone. I don't want to spoil your bedtime story there, but that's how it works. We just don't have that in Major League Soccer yet. We got a lot of great soccer journalists in this country. But the thing is, the great soccer journalists in this country, like Grant Wall, for example, I mean, not only is he covering Major League Soccer, but he's also covering the men's and women's national teams. And he writes a lot about what's going on in Europe and South America. It's tough. It's tough to be the Adam Schefter of MLS and get all this stuff because, unlike the NFL and NBA, you're covering stuff around the globe. So
then let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If in other sports, and since you spoiled all the fun, since teams do leak stuff occasionally, would MLS benefit from this information being more public?
Do you think MLS wants to publicly release that they're paying certain players $75,000?
Well, no, that's out there. Now that's the issue here is the Players Association puts that out. So that's already known. It's length of contract, it's option, it's how much room do you have under the cap, the allocation money amounts, for example.
Yeah, sure. Knows. And the Miles Robinson thing yesterday is a good example. I mean, Atlanta United was very public about the fact that they signed him through, 2023? But we don't know the number. Right. But at least they told you how long. Right. But at least they told you how long he was in for. So, yeah, I mean, that's not a bad idea. Again, I don't know. I don't know if
I'm not
MLS
100%
needs to
sure
think.
either way.
I don't know if they have to think outside the box on this, or if they want to be in lockstep with the other major stick and ball sports leagues in this country because they feel like they want to be at that table. And I think that's something that goes far beyond this specific conversation about contracts. I mean, does MLS want to try to do everything in lockstep with the NFL and NBA because they want to be a big boy, or do they want to think outside the box? Not an easy decision. That's why Don Garber gets paid a lot of money, because that's not an easy decision to make.
One day we'll solve all the problems, Mike. One day, but not today.
Yeah, not in my lifetime, I don't think.
We'll see how it goes. See you on stoppage time at 2:00.
Okay, it sounds good. Yes.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
See you guys.
Be good.
We're going to take a break, get back into the Wall Pass Wednesday timeline right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm going to let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, October 9th edition. Stoppage time later today, facebook.com/929thegame, 2:00. Myself, Mike Conti, Jimmy Vance. We'll be talking Atlanta United and anything else you guys want to throw at us. We'll talk about it there. We've got Atlanta United 2 this evening. Bethlehem Steel coming to town. Really curious to see the lineup. Want to see George Campbell, Andrew Carlton for the last time at home this season for Atlanta United 2. Looking forward to that as well. If you guys missed soccer over there on Monday, we talked about Dembele for Barcelona and his red card, where in the referee report, the referee said that Dembele, and he quoted him, that Dembele told the referee that the referee was very bad. Like, that's all he said, and gesticulated with his arms. Well, Barca appealed the red card, and it was rejected. So he's going to miss 2 games. And he's been fined for telling the referee that he was very bad. Not quoted as saying anything beyond that. I guess that's disrespectful.
Nothing colorful.
Didn't curse at him or anything. And the funniest thing about it is when Barcelona players have been asked about this, they're like, well, he couldn't say very much because he barely speaks any Spanish. So there wasn't much he could really say. Like, Lionel Messi's like, I don't know what he could have said to get sent off because he barely speaks Spanish. Enough to get suspended for 2 games. So there you go. Don't tell referees they're very bad, or you're going to get sent off for a long period of time.
Don't gesticulate and tell refs they're very bad.
It's silliness. What do we have on the Walpass Wednesday agenda?
Jason Heinley, who's going to be the next young talent for Atlanta United to bring in / develop, ?
Well, to bring in, who knows? I mean, this is the thing when this question comes up from an Atlanta United and MLS perspective. Who knew a ton about Miguel Almiron before his name came up for Atlanta United? Nobody. Same with Joseph Martinez. Same with Tito Villalba. Same with Franco Escobar. Same. It's the worldwide nature of it. Look, you're going to be talking about up-and-coming players from other countries and leagues that you don't follow on a regular basis. You can't. As much as I consume in the game and as much as I pay attention to what's going on in Argentina, like, am I watching every game for every 16 to 19-year-old player that could possibly come to Atlanta United? No. You just can't. It's impossible. So, internally, George Campbell, obviously, is going to be a homegrown player starting next year. I think he is one to watch. I think Will Riley has shown through his work with Atlanta United, too, that he is one to watch. I think Riley is a guy who could sign a homegrown deal, for sure. I'm really excited to see the development of Jackson Conway. I've been so pleased to see him this season kind of grow into his size a little bit. He's grown a lot during his time in the academy, and now I think he's figuring out how to use that size as a target forward, but still not lose the elements that have made him a special player. He's quick. He's got great feet. He's a good passer, good movement off the ball. So he can be a complete forward, and he's played a lot of minutes in the USL Championship at 17 this season. So this is a player to keep an eye on over time in development. I think there's guys who are currently playing in college that could be players to keep an eye on and look at, like a Kendall Edwards at NC State, who NC State's a good program, and Kendall Edwards didn't step straight into a starting spot there. He's one to watch because I think he was one to watch during his time last year with Atlanta United too, and injuries probably slowed his development and created a bigger opportunity for George Campbell, who passed him. So it's not an easy question to answer because there's so many unknowns with it. On the outside, Atlanta United's a club at this point that can go get a promising young teenager from anywhere because they've got a track record of selling those players on to bigger clubs. They've also got a track record of Atlanta being a place that players want to come play. So those are going to be things that are going to make you attractive to anybody. So sky's the limit on that part. But in terms of the internal development, you're starting to see players come through the academy in larger numbers, play more significant minutes with Atlanta United too. And I think, honestly, the group that you want to really keep an eye on is the current U15s because they're the ones who started day one with the academy. They're the ones that academy soccer playing has only been under the Atlanta United banner. They've been in a professional environment longer than anyone else in this city. And that group has, for the most part, stayed together. So you're going to have a ton of talent coming through that. But right now you're 13 and 14. So you're talking 2-3 years away. That's the group that's going to have the biggest impact when it comes to that time.
John Nason wants to know if there have been any leaks or news regarding scheduling for next season that you're hearing. Conference alignment, number of games, not playing everyone else, start date, those kinds of things.
Nothing. The only one that was leaked yesterday with the Soldier Field stuff is that Atlanta will play Chicago in their home opener on March 21st. That's not going to be the first game for the league, obviously, because the talk all year has been that the league season will start earlier than it did in the last few years, which has been the first weekend in March. So 1 week earlier, 2 weeks earlier, don't know. And don't know what the format will look like. I kind of assume that Chicago would move to the Western Conference, but that's not a guarantee. I mean, Nashville could go into the West instead to just keep things even with one team coming into the East, one team coming into the West. I don't love that idea. I'd like to see Nashville in the East with Atlanta and Cincinnati, because I think those are going to be big games for Nashville SC from a rivalry standpoint, and you don't want those to happen rarely. So I think Chicago moving west would make the most sense. That would then create 2 games if the format stays roughly the same with Minnesota, which is a good thing for Chicago. I think it would create 2 games down the road with St. Louis, who I would assume would be in the Western Conference when they come in. You know, you look at it, I guess the question is, you've got, in 2020, Nashville and Miami coming in. 2 teams that would make sense to go into the East. So far, for 2021, Austin, Texas is coming in. They're going to be in the West. You've got St. Louis coming in 2022. I would assume they'd be in the West. What else is going to happen? You know? Like, what are these other teams going to be? Is Sacramento going to happen? Well, it sounded like it, and then it died off again, because that's been the story of Sacramento.
Charlotte.
Well, I mean, then we could just run down the list, and we've done that many times. So there's unknown at that point. Out of what we know, 2 teams that would make sense in the East are coming, 2 teams that would make sense in the West are coming, but the Western teams are staggered. Do you want to have teams flip-flop East-West Conference based off when teams come in? No, not ideally. So do you want to just have 2 teams come into the East this time around and keep everybody else the same, or do you think long-term that Chicago's going to go to the West? I think you want to create something that is going to be consistent as much as it can be with more teams coming in, instead of constantly changing the format. You might not be able to do that, though. You know, you don't want to be like Argentina changing their league format on a regular basis, but until you get to where you want to get to, if it's 30, if it's 32, you might have to have some flexibility year after year. I guess my questions really come around, are you married to only playing 34 matches in a league season, or is that up for debate? Could you go to 36? Could you go to 38? I don't think you go down from 34. If you go more, then how does that affect things like Leagues Cup potentially expanding further down the road? How does that, affect other types of international competition that have been talked about, whether it's a Libertadores or a Sudamericana? Or I don't think CONCACAF Champions League is going to grow, but could it? Sure. Could that affect when MLS teams come into the Open Cup? Because I think the competition would benefit if MLS teams came in a round earlier, but that's an additional game to play. There's a lot of moving parts, and I don't think there's easy answers for any of it, to be honest. I hope that from a strategic standpoint, from a competition committee, that they make the decision on the number of games to play year after year, and that number gives them a format that can work when they get to 30 or 32 teams and make their decision on where they're going to be. I don't know if any of that gets done for 2020, to be honest. 2020 could be a bit of a piecemeal situation.
Jorge B's underrated players: Remedi, Diego Chara, Atuesta, and Alexander Ring.
How about those holding midfielders, huh? Always underrated.
I think Jorge B, yeah. I mean, hey, we've got a scarf.
Yes, and that's where I was going. Holding midfielders are constantly on the underrated list because, Sergio Busquets, he's not scoring a bunch of goals. He's not the assist guy. He's the pass before the assist. Kyle Beckerman, prime example. All of the players Jorge B mentioned are in that category. I saw a piece yesterday complaining about everybody talking about Diego Chara and how great Diego Chara is in the middle of the season, but then when it comes to a best 11, he doesn't get considered. Well, Edward Atuesta has been even better. Atuesta has been outstanding for LAFC. Jan Gregush, I think, has been good enough to be considered in this. Alexander Ring is always in this type of conversation because he's that good. So is Diego Chara. So is Osvaldo Alonso. There's a bunch of guys who get into this conversation. That's why we created the Holding Midfielders Appreciation Society, because there's so many guys who just don't get enough credit. And it became a joke that now is printed on a scarf. So for those of you out there, and some of you have picked up your scarves, some of you have ordered your scarves. If you want to get the new Soccer Down Here scarf, it's pinned to our profile on Twitter, what it looks like. You can order it, send us a message. It's $20 plus $5 for shipping if you need it shipped. Or you can come pick it up at our Soccer Over There shows at the Brewhouse Cafe. You can pick it up at our breakfast tailgate ahead of the playoff match with New England. Probably a 9 or 9:30 tailgate show from the Gulch.
Yeah.
Steak and eggs, maybe. One of those kind of deals. It's going to be a breakfast tailgate in the Gulch. You can pick it up there. You can pick it up at Soccer Over There. You can pick it up at any other events we do. Or send us a message if you want us to ship it to you. Quantities are limited. We don't have a ton. So if you want to get one, go ahead and get on it now. And as always, any of this kind of stuff, it just benefits the show and allows us to continually grow and provide more and better stuff for you guys. And we couldn't do it without you. So thank you.
Five Stripe Daily. Are we black with red stripes or red with black stripes?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's black with red stripes. That's my gut reaction to that question. I don't know if that's correct.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just going because the back of the shirt's black. Take a stand, John. Take a stand. Don't just say yes. Take a stand.
Black shirt, red stripes with the unified black at the back. That's where I'll go.
Yes, I agree. What else do we have?
Shiva, to add to the underrated players we've mentioned so far, she's got Nagby, Miles, Ring, Chara, and Christian Roldan.
I think Miles is getting past the underrated side. I think Roldan, with his consistency in getting call-ups, has gotten mostly past the underrated part, but maybe not. He kind of falls into the holding midfielders appreciation society as well. I think that's where he's best, but he end up being played in different spots with the national team, which I don't necessarily agree with, but whatever. Those are the two I'd maybe push back on. I think they're rated now. I think Miles is definitely rated. I don't think he's underrated. A lot of the reporters who voted in the end of the year voting for MLS awards had Ike Opara ahead of Miles for Defender of the Year. I'm fine with that. I'm not against it. Opara has been huge, and the argument that a lot of people have made is a valid one. You know, look at what Kansas City did without him this year, and look at how much better Minnesota was. Those very valid points. He's been really good. Miles has been really good. I think both of them should be in the best 11.
Tafka with a couple of points. He says, clearly we need RAM re-signing allocation money, and MLS could always just buy a charter flight company. I mean, they probably have the money.
I don't know if they have the money to buy a charter flight company. That's not cheap. It's definitely not as cheap as you think. I think that's always been the conversation about charter flights. It's just do it. I don't know specifically. I'm just going by what people have written. I don't book these things, but I've seen estimates from reporters that you're talking about $15,000 for a commercial flight versus minimum $150,000 for a charter flight. And I think that could be on the low side. It's a big difference. I mean, it's significant when you book that out over a season. It's absolutely significant. I do agree that I don't know if MLS could buy a charter flight company. I don't think so, because you look at college teams that have had to cut back on charter flights and things. It's not as common as it used to be. There's not as many available. I think creating a league partnership with a company or an airline to be the official provider and get reduced rates and the league goes all in on it would be the best approach. That's where I would go. I think it's better to partner than to buy at this point. Although, I don't know. If you can buy enough planes and do your thing, then maybe you can do it that way. Who knows? But I think it's better to probably partner in the short term and make it happen that way.
Michael Ruiz says, one portion of the new CBA that I never hear being mentioned is the salary floor. I think it's very important. It should be at least $125,000 a year. That's a very solid salary to help roster spots 9 through 20. It helps improve league growth and depth.
It's been talked about a good bit. I've said that it has to be at least six figures. Going to 125 from the floor right now of 50 or 60, it's a huge jump. If you can get there, great. The more the better. The higher the better. I think getting to 100 is the target here for sure. And that's been, I think, pretty consistently discussed when people get past the first couple talking points with the CBA. It's just not the big campaigning side of it. You know, it's not going to get the headlines. The headlines are going to be from the designated player side of it, from the charter flights, from increased cap and stuff like that. I think it will be part of it. I think that will definitely go up. I just don't know how much it will go up. You get to 100, I'm okay with that. If that's the progress they make here, I'm okay with that.
NY to GA95. If FIFA wants to do a Club World Cup that didn't mess with everyone's schedule too much, then they should do it like an international break and have the tournament hopefully sometime between May and August, so MLS will be in full form.
Well, they do it in the summer because they're not going to disrupt anything in the European leagues. There's no way they're going to do that. So it would be sometime in the summer, and I think the idea in 2021 is that it would replace the Confederations Cup. So it would be in that summer window that it typically is, and you'd basically be creating an international break for MLS and for other leagues that operate on different calendars. And you should. If it becomes a thing, and if MLS teams are part of it, then yeah, you're either creating an international break or you are then rescheduling games for whatever MLS team or teams get to that point. And that would be a little more complicated. I don't think there's a bad thing about MLS taking a summer break in general because of the heat and because of the effect on some of the matches. I believe they're not planning on taking a break in 2020 because there's no Gold Cup. You will have a Copa America. You will have the Euros. There will be some players who are called up to those from MLS teams. But I've read that they're not planning on taking a break in the summer window. In this window, it's not an international window. But they're not doing it like they have in the past. Usually, you take 2 weeks off for the Gold Cup. I don't think taking that time off in the middle of the summer is a bad thing anyway. I would not have a problem with a summer break. The conversation in Europe has been about taking a winter break and not having games in awful conditions during the holiday break, the holiday time in the calendar. If MLS flipped it and took a break in the middle in the summer when it's the hottest and it's just difficult to play in, I'd be fine with that.
Chris Ashley, again, has chimed in. He says, since MLS is off this weekend, what's a guy got to do to get an at USL League One playoff segment on Friday's show highlighting at GVL Triumph semifinal this weekend?
It's very possible. Very, very possible.
And then Daniel Price is asking if there are any plans to do anything special for any of the USM&T games.
Potentially Tuesday for the Canada-U.S. game. I'll be calling a doubleheader for Oglethorpe Friday night, and John's got high school football, so nothing official there. Tuesday for Canada-U.S. is a possibility, and stay tuned.
Joe Bost, who is now proud being a new member of the hashtag HMAS, having picked up a scarf. He says, very soft and awesome, my wife, quote, and you needed this, why? His response, one less birthday present for you to buy in because Jason and John are part of my morning life. And then apparently his wife rolled her eyes.
Thanks, Joe. Sorry to make your wife roll her eyes. That's not cool. But no, thanks for the support and being part of the SDH family for sure. We definitely appreciate it. Give a shout out to our scarf provider who does such great work, sir.
I believe that would be Die Hard and has nothing to do with Mr. McLean, John McLean. But Die Hard Scarves have done tremendous work for us in the past. And they are the guys that do all this stuff. They've got tremendous brains, and I know that you wanted to do something different with color schemes this year. and they did a really sweet job with the charcoal and the black, and bully for them. So if you have stuff that you want done, they don't do just scarves. They do a lot of other things under the Die Hard umbrella. But Die Hard, check. We like them.
Yeah, Die Hard's been great to us. They got these to us super fast. I thought we'd have them ahead of the first playoff game, the week before that game. I thought we'd get them a few days before that tailgate, and we got them 2 weeks earlier than I expected because they're pretty awesome. And the scarves look great. They feel great. Yeah, highly recommended. Die Hard has been great for us.
John Nason, surely changes to the playoff will have to follow as a part of the conversation that we were having. Just after they changed them this year, did Qatar 2022 really drive the change?
I think it did. They at one point kind of hinted that way, but yeah, I think it drove the change to the calendar. The playoff change needed to happen because of the international windows, period. They needed to avoid that. I think they chose a bad way to deal with it. I still think you could have done 2-leg playoffs, but that would have meant less teams in the playoff, and they decided, you know what, we'd rather have less playoff matches, more teams involved, as opposed to more matches, fewer teams. Because you could have done in the calendar, and let me pull up a calendar to tell you how I would have scheduled it if I can do this right in my head quickly. I would have done essentially what Mexico does, where 8 teams make the playoffs. Now, for them, it's 8 out of 19 this season. But 8 out of 19 make the playoffs. I would have had 8 make the playoffs here. And if you had done it that way with MLS Cup on the 10th, and if you want to keep that one game, all right, I would rather have that be 2 games too. But let's say you want to make that one game. So let's work backwards. Your semifinals would have to be on Wednesday, October 30th, first leg, or Thursday, October 31st, second leg, November 2nd, or November 3rd. That gives you a week before MLS Cup, and everybody's in. All right, so that's your semifinals. That's down to 4. Okay. So then you would be looking at, working backwards, the weekend prior would be the second leg of your quarterfinals, the 27th and 26th, and your quarterfinal games on the 24th and the 23rd, first legs. And if you wanted to have a play-in like you've had in the past with more teams getting involved, but they have to play in, you could have that the weekend of the 19th and 20th. So you could have the same number of teams get down to the conference semifinals, conference finals, and the final in the same window and do it with a format that you did in the past. So you'd have your play-in games, if you had 7 teams, you'd have your play-in games just like you're doing now, your first round. So those games to be on the 19th and 20th, between 2 and 7, 3 and 6, 4 and 5 in each conference. Then you would do the rest over 2 legs, but you'd play Wednesday, Saturday, or Thursday, Sunday. For your conference semi, your conference final, you'd have a full week before your one-game final. If you wanted to make the final 2 legs, you could have the first leg of the final on November 6th, on a Wednesday. Second leg on the 10th, or on the 7th and the 10th, whatever you choose. And you could do a better playoff format, and that's even involving 7 teams. You could do a better playoff format that I think gets you the better champion in the same time frame, doing it that way. So there, we solved that problem. Good. Okay.
There you go.
I will be happy when that happens, but it won't.
And the caboose today on Twitter comes from Tafka, and it is, I guess, trumpets from Sam Stejskal, where FC Dallas and Paxton Pomykal have agreed to a new long-term contract.
You're going to see more MLS teams do what Atlanta's done and what Dallas has done in terms of signing young talent and locking them down, because then that gives you leverage in making a transfer. And it's really important because Miles Robinson is a player who can play in Europe. Paxton Pomykal is a player who can play in Europe. It is much better for MLS clubs to sign them to a 5-year deal, give them security right now, give them more money right now, but also that's saying we're going to be able to make a transfer at the right time and make money on our investment on developing Pomacall and Robinson. More MLS teams need to be smart about how they do these things to avoid these situations where players want to walk on a free. That has to change for MLS to make more money. It has to. Because as we've talked about all day with MLS growing, TV rights have to go up. Transfer fee money coming in has to go up. All of this feeds a better league. It's critical. So Dallas, very smart to get this done. Not officially announced by FC Dallas yet, but Sam Stejskal has it at The Athletic. A couple other points to touch on. The manager carousel. Reports out of Mexico are saying that Matias Almeida has told his San Jose players that he's not leaving, that he's going to stay in San Jose and not go to Monterrey. Other reports had San Jose negotiating for a transfer of 5 players to be willing to let Almeida go to Monterrey. Don't know which is true. Don't know if they're conflicting. Don't know if it's just two different things that are being completely made up. So stay tuned. Some of the names that have been mentioned about the Orlando vacancy now. Simon Vines, who previously wrote for MLSsoccer.com, did a special piece for MLSsoccer.com, does a show in Orlando on the Lions. The names that he brought up in his article, Oscar Pareja, because he worked with Luis Muzzi in Dallas, and Pareja is in Tijuana, which is not exactly known for having managers for an extended period of time. Javier Torrente, Pedro Caixinha, who we talked about on Soccer Over There, a guy who's bounced around a good bit, was last at Cruz Azul. Diego Alonso, who was last at Monterrey. Jurgen Klinsmann was mentioned in the article as well, recently rumored to have turned down overtures from Chicago, which Veljko Paunovic would probably be interested to hear about. And other rumors are pointing towards Luis Felipe Scolari. All kinds of wild, different names being mentioned for Orlando. Who knows what direction they go in? I don't know. Silly season's getting underway. The manager carousel's spinning. It's October 9th, folks. It's only going to get more ridiculous as we get further along.
Also on the board, just coming across, Inter Miami and the New England Revolution officially are joining Union Omaha SC in USL League One in 2020.
So we've known about Union Omaha, who has an unbelievable logo, by the way. It is one of the
very
best
Sheffield Wednesday-ish.
It's awesome. It is such a good look. New England and Inter Miami. Are those official or are those rumors?
The official release has a quote from Stephen Short.
There we go. That's all I was asking, where it came from. So that is great for USL League One, who launched with 10 teams this year. And we've talked a lot about Tormenta down in Statesboro, Greenville. We will talk about Greenville ahead of the first USL League One playoffs that start this weekend. We'll get into that. But we'll talk about the growth of USL League One this week as well. It's a big move for these clubs. It's great for Inter Miami to have this straight out of the gate. It's great for New England to add this because they've really struggled to have places for homegrown players to play. This will hopefully push more investment and better quality coming out of their academy. It's critical. So these things are good. And I don't think there's a one way to do it between being in USL Championship or USL League One. I think it depends on you and how you want to do it. League One right now isn't as big as the USL Championship. It doesn't have as many, I think, existing teams that are going to push your talent. It's a really good starting point for Inter Miami, starting from scratch. It's going to be hard, I think, to be competitive at a USL Championship level with a second team. It makes sense. New England, kind of starting from scratch in this regard because you've never had it. You haven't had a deep enough roster to really do this. It's a good fit. I think for others, they'll find that USL Championship is a better fit. It's really worked well for the New York Red Bulls, too. I think, and people will disagree because of results, I think that it's worked well for Atlanta United. I think Miles Robinson is the player that he is because of it. I think George Campbell's development was accelerated because of it, and I think they're showing now that they can play at this level. But it takes time and commitment and also patience. So I'm intrigued to see how USL continues to grow, both at the championship and League One level. But this is a good move. This is a really good thing for player development across the board.
We're officially caught up, sir.
That means we're officially going to eat lunch, and then you can.
Makes one of us.
Yeah, well, I'm going to eat lunch. You should probably eat lunch because you got a game to call tonight. We'll work backwards. 7:30 in Kennesaw, Fifth Third Bank Stadium. Final home game for Atlanta United 2 in 2019. Come out and join us. Tickets are available. If you can't make it out, you can listen to John and I on the call on ESPN+. 7:30 is your start time. Before that, I'll be over at the 92.9 The Game studios doing stoppage time at 2 o'clock with Mike and Jimmy. It's facebook.com/929thegame. You can watch us on video. You can send us questions. Let us know kind of what your thoughts are on this Atlanta United lineup conundrum that will be going on and on and on and spinning round and round and round until we get to the 19th. And then before that, I'll be on 92.9 The Game with Andy and Randy at 1:20, and I'll hang around for the AMA segment, which generally gets weird.
Yes.
It gets weird. It'll be fun, though. You can listen on 92.9 The Game and radio.com for all of that. Before that, I'm going to eat some lunch.
Eat lunch enough for the both of us. I'll catch up with you later this afternoon after stoppage time as we head to the fraction one final time. It'll be fun.
I wish you all a good lunch and be talking to you in different formats the rest of the day. So, much platio.
Much platio.